Good morning, Warhawks. I'm Joey, and today is Thursday, April 8th. This is WTN News. Thanks for tuning in. Seniors, don't forget to get your grad night at Busch Gardens, your tickets for that. If you haven't heard, it is going to be on May 7th from 7 p.m. to midnight. You will have access to coasters, music, live entertainment, and much more. It will be a physically distanced party that will pack endless thrills. The cost is $90, and the tickets are going to sell out fast. Your tickets include entrance to the park, a meal voucher, as well as transportation to and from the event. Tickets are on sale from 6:45 to 7:10 a.m. at a senior window located at the end of B Hall and at lunch. Tickets are sold until they are sold out. The last day to purchase tickets is April 23rd if they have not been sold out before that date. Make sure to get your tickets today. Don't forget that yearbooks are on sale. Go to balfour.com to get yours today before the next price increases. Make sure to get your scheduled proof sheets in today to the guidance office. All proof sheets are due today. We want to remind you about the monthly drawings for you to win Chick-fil-A, Amazon, or Jodo's gift cards. Be nominated by one of our teachers for exhibiting the Warhawk Way. All students who earn honor roll or principal's list for the 9 weeks will earn a chance to win Apple AirPods. The third quarter winner will be announced on our show very soon. If a student earns principal's list or honor roll multiple times throughout the year, they will be in a drawing for one of 2 Apple Watches at the end of the year. Some great incentives to strive for all A's and B's. Keep striving, Warhawks. Now in sports. Today our track team has a tri-meet at Eastlake starting at noon. Our flag football team is away at Palm Harbor, and our softball team is playing away at the school across the bridge. Come out and show your support to our Warhawks. This is the end of the news portion for our show. Right after our close, we will go to Nick and Tori from Rho Kappa. They are going to be presenting some information on women's history. We would love to have your information and activities on the show. Send us your news to merrimackma@pcsb.org. If you are interested in being on the show, we'd love to have you. Email us for details. Thank you for watching WTN News, and have a great day, Warhawks. Now, here's Nick and Tori.
Hi, I'm Nick McClure.
And I'm Tori Foltz. We're members of Rho Kappa, the National Social Studies Honor Society.
You may not know that last month was Women's History Month. This year's theme is Volatile Woman of the Vote, Refusing to be Silenced. The theme honors the women who fought for voting rights for women in the United States.
In July 1848, the first calls for women's suffrage were made from a convention in Seneca Falls.
Wait, what was that? There were calls for women to suffer?
No. We're talking about women's suffrage.
Okay.
It means voting rights, not to be confused with suffering. Although, you could say that their inability to participate in the voting process was a form of suffering because they had no voice in the decisions that were being made. But no, that's just going to confuse everyone. Let's be clear. When we say women's suffrage, we're talking about women's right to vote. A suffragette was a female activist who was fighting for the right for women to vote. Got it?
Yep, got it.
Okay, let's try this again. In July 1848, the first calls for women's suffrage were made from a convention in Seneca Falls, New York. This convention kicked off more than 70 years of organizing, parading, fundraising, advertising, and petitioning before the 19th Amendment securing this right was approved by Congress and 3/4 of the state legislators. After the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, women used their organizing skills they had honed during the suffrage movement to continue to fight for equality. The passage of the 19th Amendment was the result of centuries of struggle, culminating in the late 19th century in a burst of public activism and civil disobedience that not only secured voting rights for women, but also helped define new possibilities for women's participation in the public sphere.
Wait. So women could not actually vote anywhere in the U.S. until 1920?
Well, actually, no. It's a little more complicated than that.
History usually is.
Yes. So early in the history of the United States, women in New Jersey could legally vote, provided they met property requirements. However, this changed in 1807 when the state assembly passed a law limiting suffrage, also known as voting, to free white males. There would not be another law explicitly giving the vote to women until 1869, when the Wyoming Territory granted women over 21 years of age the right to vote in all elections. While some states explicitly prohibited women from voting, in 1872 New York did not, opening the door for Susan B. Anthony and a small group of suffragists to register and vote.
Oh, I've heard of her.
That's great. Well, Susan B. and her cohorts were arrested 3 weeks later on a charge of criminal voting. Anthony was found guilty and fined $100 plus court costs.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, there's more. The first large gathering of those fighting for women's rights occurred in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. One outcome of the Seneca Falls Convention was the drafting and signing of the Declaration of Sentiments.
Oh, so it's like a woman's Declaration of Independence.
Exactly. They
Okay.
actually modeled it after the Declaration of Independence, calling for civil, social, political, and religious rights for women. Many of the signers of the Declaration, including Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, would go on to become the leaders of a generation of suffrage activists.
You know, Tori, I think a video clip would really help us to visualize what you're talking about.
Really?
Play the
Great
clip, guys.
idea.
When the nation's founders drafted the Constitution in 1787, they made no mention of women. At the time, women were excluded from political and in many ways public life. Enslaved women were excluded entirely. White women were considered under the authority of their husbands or fathers. They could not own property, make contracts, go to court, control money they earned, or vote. In 1868, a proposal for a constitutional amendment extending the right to vote, regardless of race, color, or sex, was introduced in the House. Congress never voted on it. Efforts to extend suffrage to women continued in every session until 1919, when Congress passed a proposed amendment and sent it to the states for ratification. The 19th Amendment was not easily won. Women's suffragists encountered resistance from both women and men. For more than 70 years, a large and diverse group of suffragists used a wide variety of strategies to win voting rights for women. Some focused on amending the U.S. Constitution, while others worked to change state election laws. Women participated in boycotts, petitioned, and fundraised. They wrote articles, gave speeches, organized marches, and were sometimes imprisoned for their protests. In 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed. It extended voting without regard to race, color, or previous condition of servitude, but excluded gender. Women flooded Congress with petitions for, and in some cases against, women's suffrage. Women's suffragists came from a broad spectrum of race, ethnicity, and class. Working class women used their experience as labor organizers to effectively agitate for the vote. Women of color, especially black women, played an essential role in lobbying for the vote at the national, state, and local levels. Fighting against racism both outside and within the suffrage movement, women of color persisted in their quest for enfranchisement. After decades of struggle, women won the political support necessary for ratification of the 19th Amendment. After Congress passed the amendment, 3/4 of the states, 36 states at that time, had to ratify the 19th Amendment before it could be added to the Constitution. By the end of March 1920, only one more state was needed. On August 18, 1920, after calling a special session of the state legislature, Tennessee became the 36th state to ratify, and the 19th Amendment became part of the Constitution. The Constitution leaves voting eligibility requirements up to the states. Who can vote and what they can vote on has varied from state to state over time. Before the 19th Amendment's ratification, 15 states had already granted women at least some voting rights. But because the states decide voter qualification, millions of women remained unable to vote for reasons other than sex even after 1920. Puerto Rican women were excluded from the 19th Amendment, and in 1935, all adult women finally gained the vote. Puerto Ricans today still lack equal voting rights with most other U.S. citizens. You cannot vote if you are not a citizen, and this limited voting rights for many Native Americans and Asian immigrant women. All Native Americans were granted U.S. citizenship in 1924. Asian immigrants couldn't become citizens until 1952. African American voters, especially in the South, faced discriminatory measures meant to keep them from the polls until most of those practices were outlawed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Many Latin American and other immigrant or indigenous citizens faced language barriers to voting that would not be addressed until the Voting Rights Act of 1975. In the 100 years since the ratification of the 19th Amendment, voting rights have been expanded to millions more women.
Did that help?
Definitely.
Great. So, like I was saying, suffrage leaders were involved in other progressive movements before and after the Seneca Falls Convention, in addition to their suffrage work. Susan B. Anthony, an outspoken advocate for suffrage, was also a well-known abolitionist. Anthony and other suffragists got their start by speaking on the anti-slavery circuit. For suffragists, these causes fit together. With access to the ballot came an unprecedented power to effect change for these and other social issues.
Was there any backlash? There's always some backlash, right?
Yes, that is correct. These activists were criticized for campaigning in ways that were considered unladylike, such as marching in parades and giving street corner speeches. One radical strategy that had not been tried previously was regular picketing of the White House.
Interesting. I bet the fight for women's voting for voting rights for women escalated when the United States entered World War I in April 1917, and many women moved into the workforce. You know, Rosie the Riveter and all that.
Good try. Rosie the Riveter was World War II, but you're not wrong about the effects of women in the workplace during the First World War. The 19th Amendment is passed in 1920, just after the end of World War I. Coincidence? I think not.
I knew it.
Right. So, as we conclude, we should remember the legacy of the suffragists continues to the present day. In fighting for the right to vote, women formed national political organizations, developed new strategies for protest, and brought women into the public sphere in new and more visible ways. These advances laid the groundwork for civic action that has been emulated by those working for other civil rights causes.
The women who fought for voting rights had a huge impact on our country, but they were certainly not the only women to make significant contributions to history. Here are a few stories of other women whose contributions should be remembered and celebrated.
March is Women's History Month. It's a time we set aside to honor women's contributions in science, business, sports, social movements, and so many other fields. For centuries in America, women's contributions in these fields were often overlooked. As a result, they were omitted from history. That's why we celebrate Women's History Month and the opportunity it gives us all to get a more complete picture of our American history. It's important that we use times like this to teach new generations about those women we all know, like Rosa Parks, whose refusal to surrender her seat to a white passenger on a bus helped launch the effort to end racial segregation in America. Like Susan B. Anthony, an abolitionist who became one of the leading figures in the movement to gain the right to vote for women. And like Claire Booth Luce, the first American woman appointed to a major ambassador post. This month also gives us an opportunity to learn about those women whose names we don't know as well. Like Alice Ball, an African-American chemist who in the early 20th century developed the first successful treatment for leprosy, a debilitating disease that once left its victims ostracized from society. And like journalist Nellie Bly, who posed as a mental patient in 1887 to go undercover in a women's mental asylum in New York City to expose the terrible conditions patients were subjected to. Her report led to lasting institutional reforms in mental health care. And like chemist Stephanie Kwolek, who in 1965 created a lightweight and durable new fiber that later became Kevlar, which is used to create bulletproof vests and helmets that protect the lives of our law enforcement and military. Women have invented new medicines, fought as heroes on our battlefields, and enforced the laws in our communities. They led in the effort to end slavery. They have created businesses and built hospitals, and they fought to secure their own right to vote. Women have played pivotal roles in building this country. The United States wouldn't be the economic superpower and the world's beacon of liberty without their contributions. On the home front, on the war front, and in the workplace, women have served and shaped our great nation. That's why Women's History Month is such an important opportunity for us to pause and honor their profound contributions. As we recognize them, let's also honor the everyday women who make our families, communities, economy, military, and nations so strong. The Heritage Foundation is deeply proud to honor them all, not only during Women's History Month, but indeed every day of the year.
We have one more story to share with you today in honor of Women's History Month. This comes to us from a post by the St. Petersburg Museum of History. You know we love to spotlight local history, so we would like to tell you about a St. Petersburg native, Nicole Haslett, whose swimming career got its start at age 6 with the St. Pete Aquatics Club. The future Olympic gold medalist won 4 Florida high school state championship swimmings for Lakewood High, and at age 16 won the 50, 100, and 200 meter events at the U.S. Opening Swimming Championships.
While at the University of Florida, she won several NCAA titles, 28 All-American honors, named the SEC's Female Swimmer of the Year 4 years in a row, and their Female Athlete of the Year twice. In the 1990 Goodwill Games, Nicole was the first American woman to defeat a swimmer from East Germany since the 1972 Summer Olympics, and in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, won 3 gold medals. Nicole retired from professional swimming in 1995, but was inducted into the Florida Sports Hall of Fame in 2005.
We hope you found informed and maybe even inspired by our presentation today. Now we have a Women's History Challenge for you.
Teachers, RoCAPA has created a Kahoot game testing your knowledge of famous women in history for your AR students to play as a class. Please use the link provided in the AR email or this QR code to join the game. When you join, please use the teacher's name so we know where to send the prizes if your class wins.
This is a self-paced Kahoot, so we will monitor the game and send prizes to the winning classrooms next week during AR. We've expanded the number of teams allowed to play, so every class should be able to join the game. Thanks and good luck!